Hi guys.
Hi Ben, how you doing?
Hi Ben.
All right, how you doing? You okay? Thanks very much for bringing it forward now. I appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Just incidentally, what time is it there now?
10 o'clock.
Almost 10.
So you're 4 hours in front, right? Okay.
Yeah.
We had on our group chat this morning. We had Andrei Konchelskis, and he's in Uzbekistan.
Oh,
okay. What's he doing over there?
He's managing one of the Uzbeki teams, and their season resumes on Sunday.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. Good guy. Good fun.
Yeah.
And his English has improved a lot.
I'm going to look for his social media and hopefully have him on next as well.
Yeah, he's a real good guy. Real good guy. Good fun.
No, but thank you so much for taking the time out, Ben. What an absolute honor it is for all of us here to speak to you.
No problem at all.
Okay, so Ben, we're going to talk about your initial years, obviously, and then the injuries and your departure from United, and then your career from there on. So
okay,
is there anything you wouldn't like us to discuss, or would we just
no? If you ask me something and I'd rather not comment on it, then I'll let you know. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head where that'll matter.
Okay, perfect.
I won't speak about the Glazers or Ed Woodward.
No, of course.
Okay,
course.
But anything football related is fine.
Yeah, but we're an official supporters club, so we're not supposed to talk about them either.
No, fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, so Hassan, you can talk to Ben about our go live.
Okay, great. So firstly, Ben, again, thank you so much for coming on. It means so much to all of us. We've got a nice little family of Reds here in Pakistan. We're about 100+ members now. Few of us go to Old Trafford whenever we can. It's not always easy, but I know of guys who go from here, they pay hundreds of thousands, well, not thousands of pounds to, get an air ticket, get a visa, go to the game. We have screenings in different parts of the country. People stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning to watch the games. We're very passionate about United out here, and having an ex-United player with us, an FA Cup, Youth FA Cup winning player. Thank you so much for being on. It means so much to us.
No problem. And it just goes to show how much Manchester United means the world over when people are prepared to sacrifice so much. So we are fully aware of what the club means and how much the supporters mean to our club.
So if Ben, we can ask you're from Bury, and is that where you started off before you joined United's youth program, the famous youth program that went on to produce yourselves in the class of '92?
Well, I was actually born in Bury, but I was only there for the first 18 months of my life. My upbringing was only about 5 minutes from Old Trafford in Salford, so I don't really remember anything of living in Bury. But before I eventually joined Manchester United as a 14-year-old, believe it or not, I was with Manchester City. The same as Ryan Giggs, he was with Manchester City too. So, but it took a knock on my front door from a certain Sir Alex Ferguson to convince me to join Manchester United. But it didn't need that much convincing, I can promise you. They're a club that I always supported from being a boy. They were the closest club to me, and yeah, when he actually came calling, it was a no-brainer for me. I was more than happy to be linked up with Manchester United.
So the initial group that you joined, you mentioned yourself, obviously Ryan Giggs, and then of course all the other lads that came on, and the class of '92. The world still talks about it today. So important to United's success, to Sir Alex's success. At that time, we keep hearing about what a tough school it was with Eric Harrison and obviously Sir Alex being on board, Brian Kidd. What was it like for someone age 14 playing for their dream club? Did you guys even think at that time that there is a pathway to the first team with United playing so many young players?
Do you know what? At the time, you probably didn't, but I think that with the caliber of players that we had, certainly that joined the club in 1991, that became the class of '92. Ryan Giggs was a year older than we were, so he was already there. But the likes of Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt, David Beckham, players as well that still had great careers that left Manchester United, like Keith Gillespie and Robbie Savage. You know, I think it quickly became apparent that we were such a talented group of players that Sir Alex immediately had his ears pricked up that there would be players here that could possibly play in the first team, not just once or twice, but for season after season after season. And of course, some of those names that I just mentioned, they would have saved him millions in the transfer market. There's no question about it. But they were such a talented group of players. They were a fantastic group of lads to be in a dressing room with, to share social time with. But when you got them on the pitch, you could tell that their dream was, like mine, was also to play for Manchester United. They gave everything. They were talented. They listened. They were willing to learn. They were respectful of the things that Sir Alex and Eric Harrison wanted to implicate into the club. And when you have, like a recipe of all those things, then you're going to have a good meal. And they were certainly a very, very successful group of players. But they deserved it because they worked and they listened.
Okay, so since we're talking about the academy, Tarad, you can go with your question first.
Yeah, Ben, I have a very interesting question because we're talking about the class of '92, and what we witnessed was that there were a lot of players that came through in the first team and went on to have very good professional careers. Not all of them had the best talent. Not everybody was David Beckham. Like there were your Nicky Butts and Gary Nevilles, who were sheer hard workers. So what was it in the coaching that made all of these players come through the academy? What was it so special about them? And then in recent times, if you see, our academy hadn't really been producing a lot of these players, but now we've seen Marcus Rashford come through, Brandon Williams. There's a lot of academy players that have come through. Scott McTominay has come through. We've got a lot of academy players, Mason Greenwood, Tahith Chong. All of these players are coming through the academy. So we're seeing a sort of resurgence in the youth products that are coming through at Manchester United. So what is the similarities between the academy then? Is Nicky Butt implementing what Eric Harrison was doing? Or how has it again evolved into the same thing?
Do you know what? I think that is definitely a massive link, Nicky Butt. I think he's done an absolutely fantastic job at running the academy. We had, just before we finished, our youth team had reached the semi-final of the FA Youth Cup for the first time in a long, long time. But going back to your original, the first part of your question, when why did these players become such good players? I think that Eric Harrison and Sir Alex Ferguson recognised what individual talents these players had. I played a lot with Nicky Butt before we actually joined the club, and I can assure you that even though he doesn't get spoken about in terms of huge talent, in raw talent, if you like, Nicky was, believe it or not, he was absolutely sensational to play with. Before I became a winger or a wide player, I played in the centre of midfield, and I partnered Nicky on many an occasion. And he was an absolutely brilliant player, no question about it. Gary Neville, you've also mentioned, he was somebody else that, by his own admission, he didn't have some of the talent of some of the other boys, but he was the epitome of somebody that worked extremely hard to get to where he got to. Not just captaining Manchester United, but 80 odd caps for England. And you can see how hard he works with his punditry now. Everything that Gary does, he puts 110% in, and more often than not, he's extremely successful. And I think that these coaches recognise that. And I think the same thing is happening now. And there's no coincidence that Nicky Butt can see a resemblance with the players that he's got at the moment to the players that we had back in the early days, in the early 90s. and he is bringing all their talents and all their individual characteristics on a football field to the fore. And you've already mentioned Brandon Williams, Mason Greenwood, 12 goals already this season, unbelievable. And without any question, he will add to that in the the number of games that we have to play before they decide when they're going to resume the 2021 season. He will definitely add to that. There are players that you might not have seen so much, like Ethan Laird, Dylan Levitt, James Garner. These players, I promise you, will all feature at some stage this season because they are a talented bunch. I've seen a lot of the under-23s this year, as I have the first team, and it will not be long before Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is doing exactly what Sir Alex Ferguson did, and these lads will be challenging for places in the first team before too long. Not just Mason and Brandon, but there'll be 3 or 4 others that will be knocking on the door, I can assure you of that.
Yeah, the talents you're naming, obviously there's another that I'm a big fan of, Ted Mengi, the CB. He's a monster for his age and really talented. I really enjoy watching him play as well. Okay, so Ben, we've talked about your introduction to United. So how was your debut and how did your career start? What did Sir Alex tell you before the game?
I only found out on the way that it happened then was that you would come into training on a Friday morning, be prepared to travel like we had to do to West Ham straight after we'd finished training. And I had no idea. And on the Thursday morning, Brian Kidd said, you train as normal today with the reserves, but tomorrow when you come in, you will need your club suit and tie, and you will be travelling to West Ham with the team and staying overnight. And back then, Sir Alex only ever took the number of people that he would need. So he would have 11 players and 3 substitutes. There wasn't any extra. So I knew that there was a good chance that I would make my debut. I didn't know. I was pretty sure that I wouldn't start the game, but I always knew that there was a really, really good chance that Sir Alex would introduce me. When it got to 2-1 for West Ham, I didn't think that he would risk me, but he did. And unfortunately for me, we scored an equaliser through Paul Ince near the end of the game that got us a very, very good draw, because West Ham was an incredibly difficult place to play. But making my debut is definitely one of the highlights of my life, along with my son being born. It is without question something that nobody can ever take away from me. It's something that I know that millions of people would love to get the opportunity to do. I'm obviously, very sad that I didn't get a chance to play anywhere near as much as the other guys for obviously reasons that I'm sure we'll touch on. But to make your debut for Manchester United when you're 18 years of age, it makes me very proud. And like I said, something that people would give a lot for.
How do you rate your performance?
I've played better, but I've played worse. I only got about 20 to 25 minutes, I think, in the end. But I didn't, from what I can recall, I didn't do anything spectacular. But I didn't make any mistakes either. So for a debut at 18 in, like I said, a very, very difficult atmosphere, I'll take that. And it's just a shame I never got the chance to build on it.
Okay, so Trad touched upon the influence of Eric Harrison as well. I just wanted to ask that the class of 92 was mainly coached by Eric Harrison, if I'm not wrong. And when you guys were a part of the first team, so how did Sir Alex differentiate between the class of 92 being coached by Eric Harrison? Or, did you get separate times to get coached by Eric Harrison, or did Sir Alex did it all?
No, I think that at the time that you're talking about when we were involved with Eric, it was only on the odd few occasions that somebody would be plucked out from the youth team to go and train with the first team. It didn't happen too often in the early years, so our coaching was mainly done up until 1993, at the end of 93, by Eric Harrison. And let me tell you, he was a fantastic guy. He was cut from the same cloth as Sir Alex. They were very old school. They demanded a lot of hard work, a lot of discipline. And Eric was somebody who, if he shouted at you on a Saturday, by Monday morning, it was forgotten about. Nothing was overhanging. He might speak to you on a personal basis, but any of the lads that you would ever get the chance to speak to, myself, Nicky Butt, David Beckham, the whole list, they will tell you that Eric Harrison was a massive influence on not just their career, but on on human life, on you as an actual person. He instilled all the right characteristics into you to go through life, whether you stayed in football all your life or whether you went somewhere else. I wouldn't have changed Eric for the world, and I'm so sorry that he isn't with us anymore, because he had such a lot of influence on players before we arrived and players after. And so I know that Sir Alex Ferguson, as we all did, respected him greatly.
Okay, Hassan, you can go with your next question.
Ben, we spoke about Eric, obviously, and Sir Alex. I know Nobby Stiles, former Manchester United legend, England legend. He rated you very, very highly. Was Sir Alex involving players from the past like Nobby? Was it something that helped the younger guys like yourselves coming through, that you had access to club legends as you were going through the system? Because these guys had, won it all. They won World Cups and one had success with United. How big was it for you, and also by extension the class of '92, to have access to people like Nobby?
Massively. When you think that through our careers that have been there, Sir Bobby Charlton had been there, won the World Cup, won the European Cup. Nobby Stiles, who played in exactly the same team. Brian Kidd, who had obviously scored one of the goals in the European Cup final in '68 as a 19-year-old as well. To have these people to look up to teach you everything that they knew and what it meant to be a Manchester United player was completely invaluable. And we were very, very blessed with being able to get so close to these guys and to learn from them, and to try and emulate what they had achieved. And obviously, unfortunately, we even with the blessed amount of talent that we had in that class of '92, none of them managed to go on and win a World Cup, but more than one of them won the European Champions League on more than one occasion. So they obviously took note, and that is what Manchester United is all about. It's all about success, and these players who we've just mentioned, Nobby, Sir Bobby, Brian Kidd, with our education growing up, they were absolutely invaluable, and they treated us all as equals. They wanted the success for us as much as we wanted it, and as much as they'd had it, and that was what made them stand apart.
And when you came into the first team, around the time that Sir Alex and the team started winning the Premier League, the very first Premier League, we'd had a close run-in with Leeds winning the very last, first division. And then you guys were sort of phased in slowly, because there was still the Kanchelskises and the Inces and the Mark Hughes, people in that positions. I know when Sir Alex sold them, and then everybody said you can't win anything with kids, and then the kids came in and won everything there is to win. But at that time, coming into a team where you have the Kanchelskis, obviously Ryan was by then Ryan Giggs was more of a regular. For yourself and David Beckham, were you guys like vying for the same place, or was your versatility the fact that you could play on both wings? Was Sir Alex, do you think, looked at you as someone who could play right wing, left wing? I know you played striker also. So before your injury, at that time with the club management and things, did they talk to you about specific roles or ideas about gradually easing you in? Because you were still young. You made your debut at 18. Around the time the team, around 94, 95, you'd still be in your early 20s. You'd be 21.
Yeah, I think it was belief. The manager saw that he had a talented group of players, and even though we knew what was in front of us, you've already mentioned some of those names: Giggs, Sharp, Kanchelskis, who were players that played in myself and David's position. Paul Ince and Brian Robson was still playing then as well. Steve Bruce, Gary Pallister, where where Gary Neville and co needed to try and emulate Paul Parker, who was obviously an England international. So we knew that we were a talented group of players, but we also knew that it wasn't going to be easy to be able to dislodge some of these guys who had won the first Premier League. They were an incredibly exciting team to watch, counter-attacking with the pace of Giggs and Sharp and Kanchelskis, the power of Paul Ince and the organisation of Bruce and Robson, and obviously a brilliant keeper in Peter Schmeichel. So the team was littered with international players and with very, very talented players. But I think that Sir Alex knew that there was going to come a time when these players either needed to move on because they were getting on in age, or because the players that he had in the class of 92 team were actually going to be better than what he already had. And when you see some of the names, I mean, Brian Robson retired, obviously. Steve Bruce went and took a player manager role, but he saw fit to get rid of one of the best midfielders in the country in Paul Ince. In 1995, he left for Milan because he had Paul Scholes, he had David Beckham, he had Nicky Butt. And he felt as though getting rid of Paul Ince wouldn't actually be that much of a problem. And he was a massive influence on Manchester United's team and the way that they played. But he was happy to allow Paul Ince to join Inter Milan because he knew that he had players waiting in the wings. He allowed Lee Sharp to go to Leeds. He allowed Andrei Kanchelskis to go to Everton because he could see, and this is what made him such a great manager, he could see that these players were going to develop into players that he wanted. He'd moulded them into players, along with Eric Harrison, that he knew could fit into Manchester United's first team. And on the strength of that, 3, 4, maybe 5 players that he had in the first couple of years of winning the Premier League weren't there anymore. Paul Parker had moved on as well, and Gary Neville filled in his slot for the next 15 years. So that is what made Sir Alex such a wonderful manager. He made the right decisions, even though at the time people would raise their eyebrows. He made the right decisions, and as you quite rightly said, the start of that
95, 96.
94,
95.
94, 95, when Alan Hansen said we lost 3-1 at Villa, and he said you can't win a title with kids, and how he will rue those words every single day of his life because everybody brings it up, and he had them rammed down his throat.
Were those words spoken about in the dressing room?
Oh, definitely. It gives you motivation. It gives you motivation. Even though Sir Alex knew that on the day he'd been beaten by an Aston Villa team, he could see what was starting to develop. And a little bit like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has started to see now, and what we are all seeing with the team that he's building. He didn't panic, and he didn't say, oh, no, maybe Alan Hansen's right. I must bring back all the senior players. He stuck with these guys because he knew what wonderful players they were going to turn out to be, and he was exactly right.
Ben, if we can talk about your career at United at that time, obviously with your injury costing you so much time, a year out of the side, then obviously so much upheaval, Giggs and Becks and all the others coming through. Around 1998, which is the time when you left, and then United went on to win the treble. Were you thinking to yourself that it's not worth sticking around to fight for it anymore? Did you personally feel you were ready to play more football, or was it something communicated to you that, Ben, maybe you're better off looking for another place because we feel that we're going to go, bring in more reinforcements, put in more people in your positions? Because I'm guessing Jesper Blomqvist would have come in partly also because we were light on numbers because you had left at the start of that season.
I think it's a combination of both, but I also think it's a combination that after the injury that I had, I realised that I was never going to be a regular in Manchester United's first team. I think before the injury, there was a chance that I certainly would have been given the opportunity to prove that, but the injury just took away the real key components of my game, and that was the speed off the mark. And when you're playing at the elite level as Manchester United, competing season in, season out, you need to be at the absolute peak. And I wasn't there anymore. And I've gone on record on many an occasion of saying that I think after I'd been on loan to Huddersfield in 1996 and I played for England, that gave me a taste of being able to play regular first team football. And I was happy I would have been not happy to have left. That's not true. Nobody wants to leave Manchester United. But I think that for my own personal benefit, it would have been better for me to perhaps have joined Huddersfield Town when they wanted me in 1996 and not waited another 2 years until 1998. I think that was because Sir Alex wanted me. He wanted me to stay in '96, but I think in 1998, when my contract came to an end, we both agreed that it would be better for me to move on to enhance my chances of having a good career in the game and not playing sort of 23, 24 in Manchester United's reserves anymore. And we came to an agreement, and he was extremely helpful. But I think 1998 was the absolute, sort of end of the road for me at Manchester United. Like I said, I would have gone in '96, but he wanted me to stay the manager. I think in 1998 he realised that he needed to let me go in order to progress in my chosen career. And he's never been anything but helpful, and I will always remember that. And he wrote me a letter on my departure, which I put in my book and which I've got cherished in like a scrapbook, if you like, just to say that I never gave him any headaches, and any time that he wanted, I needed to call on him, his door was always open, which it always was when I was at the club as well. And for that, I'm extremely grateful to have somebody like him to turn to if I ever needed to.
Yes, I was reading the podcast as well. I was reading the podcast as well a few days ago, that you wanted a forward from Sir Alex Ferguson, and that you went to Old Trafford as well. And then you had to go to him through, I think, Brian McClare's daughter, who was the communications department at United. And then Sir Alex obviously had that attack, and then he couldn't get the forward to you. And then he also introduced you very well, that he told Brian McClare's daughter that this kid would have been an England star as well. So the human side is quite obvious. And now if you can move on and talk about the injury, how did it happen, and what were your reactions towards it?
Well, I think it was the 6th of April, if I'm not mistaken, in 1994. It was about 6 weeks after I'd made my debut at West Ham. And at the beginning of the week, the manager had said, we've got an FA Cup semi-final on Sunday against Oldham Athletic, and Ryan Giggs might be struggling for it. I might need you to play. So I need you to go and have a game in the reserves on Wednesday night, against Blackburn Rovers, because you haven't had any football in a while. Wembley's a big pitch, it's a heavy pitch. And if you are needed to play, I need you to get some match practice. So I went out and I played about 60 minutes of a reserve game. Up until that point, I think I'd scored 2. Everything was going extremely well. And the manager at the time, our reserve team manager, Jim Ryan, he shouted onto the pitch and said, how are you feeling? Are you okay? Sir Alex was sitting in the stands. He'd obviously sent a message to me through him. And I just gave a thumbs up. I said, I'm absolutely fine. I'm happy to carry on. I'm an 18-year-old kid, who's enjoying his football. If you try telling an 18-year-old kid who's enjoying his football at Man United that he needs to come off when he's playing so well, then anybody would have given the same reaction and the same answer. But it turns out that it was probably the worst decision I've ever made, because within probably about 5 or 10 minutes of me saying, no, I'm happy, I want to carry on, I was tackled, quite viciously by the guy that had been marking me for the whole game. And I knew instantaneously there was a problem. Our goalkeeper, who was Gary Walsh at the time, he was 70 yards away in his own goal on the edge of his box. And he said that he heard the snap, and the extent of the damage was quite remarkable. It was a full-blooded tackle, no attempt to get the ball at all. He caught me just below my knee. The ball had already gone. as a seasoned professional that he was, and a defender I was 18, he was 28. He knew what he was doing, and whether he was that type of person or not, and I'm sure he wasn't, but it didn't sort of affect the end result. It was a bad tackle from somebody who should have known better, and he effectively ruined my chances of forging a career at the club that I love.
Was he sent off, Ben? Was he
No,
even sent off?
He wasn't sent off, and I think it was only of the protests from my players, who immediately knew what a bad tackle it was, that he was given a yellow card. But I think that the referee, if he were to have seen the tackle again, he probably would have turned around and said, "I made a mistake. It was a bad tackle." But no, unfortunately, he wasn't sent off, and not that it would have made the slightest bit of difference to me.
No.
But I understand where you're coming from. You know, people say, "Well, if it was that bad a tackle, why was he not sent off?" But I think that anybody that saw the tackle,
should have been sent off.
Again, he should have been. Yeah, he should have been.
I mean, I think back to Luke Shaw's leg break and nothing. You've broken someone's leg and the guy got nothing. And I'm just amazed at how sometimes referees just let these things go.
I agree. So yeah, like I said, he wasn't sent off, but it was mere details to me. Obviously, I had a long, hard road ahead of me. I knew that the damage was bad, and that was confirmed by the surgeon when he opened my knee up, and he said it was like you put a book on its spine and just watch all the pages fan out. There was nothing left.
This was in your right knee, was it, Ben? Or your right or your left? So your main foot? Yeah.
Yeah, my right knee.
Okay, so Ben, we've seen several footballers who have suffered from injuries, and then maybe sometimes they're scared to step on a football pitch again. Maybe there are other issues they're dealing with. Obviously, the mental side is important as well. So what kept you going, and how was the support from the club as well? Because, for example, I remember Dean Ashton was quite an amazing striker in the Premier League. In my early days, obviously, I watched him, and he was good, but his injuries hampered him. And then I don't think he went for coaching either. But there are several examples of players who were injured early in their career and then decided to be a coach or manager. So did that thought ever enter your mind?
No, it didn't. I mean, to answer the first bit of your question, I mean, the support that I had was absolutely fantastic, from the manager to the coaching staff to my teammates to the people, obviously, that I love in my family, my friends. I had a huge network of people that supported me, and do you know what? When you are in that sort of a position, when you're 18 years of age, and you basically get told by the surgeon that there's a chance that you will never, not just not play for Manchester United, but just not play football again, that's hard to take. And I'm so glad that these days now there's a huge element of people and a huge network of people that are trained and qualified to deal with the mental side of it, because that is what does it the most. You know that as a professional athlete, that physically you are going to be okay again, unless it's that horrific. But physically you will be okay. But it's the mental pressure that you have in the meantime. Like I said, when you are such an early age, that you do need the stable support of people to be able to get through the dark times. And there were plenty of those when I was coming back. You know, there would be weeks when things would be going great, and there'd be other weeks when I just didn't feel like I was making any progress whatsoever. So to have Sir Alex and Dave Fever, who was the physio at the time, who'd just come, ironically, from Blackburn. Sorry, he went to Blackburn Rovers, but he'd just come from Wigan Rugby League, and he had an extensive knowledge of being able to deal with knee rehabilitations, especially cruciate ligament knee, like I had. So I was in the best possible hands, and any time that I felt as though I just needed a break, then Sir Alex said to me, "Listen, I want you to come in here and I need you to work 100%. If your mind's not on it or you're not ready, or you just don't feel like it, then you need to take a break, and that's not a problem at all. But you just come and tell me, tell the physio, tell your coaching staff, and we'll give you a couple of days to refresh, recharge your batteries, and then come in, because with the extent of the injury that you had, there is no point in trying to do your rehabilitation and doing it half-heartedly. You have to put everything into it to get everything out, and that is what I did to be able to still play professional football, but without the support network of the club and my family and my friends in the club and out of the club, then that might not have happened. And it is so important, and that's why I'm so glad that these days people have access very, very readily to the psychological part of the game rather than the physical, because there are so many players that don't come back from injuries like this because, like you said, they are scared to set foot on a football field, because their minds drift elsewhere and they go into things like drink and gambling, and it's a huge part of football. And we've seen people taking their own lives, not just in football, but in all manner of not just sport, just everywhere, because the pressure builds up and they don't know where they can turn. And it's great that we now, in football and in other sports, have a network of people that we can turn to that will address the psychological issues as well as the physical.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tayyab, you can go next.
Right. Thank you for sharing so much with us about your injury. I mean, all of us have tried to play football at some point in our lives, and we've gone through injury. Thankfully, nothing as horrific as what you went through. But I think some of us, or most of us, can relate to what you've just said. You touched upon this subject a little. I want to ask how much the youth academy actually plays into the transfer market or future plans for the manager at Manchester United. Because if you've got players coming through and it's a position that you'd like to fill in with, do you wait a season to actually give your academy youth products a chance, or do you go into the transfer market irrespective of what the youth academy is producing?
I think that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is certainly in a very, very strong position at the moment. We all know that football clubs can't solely survive on producing players from the youth system. Players like teams like Manchester United, who are competing at the top level, they have to have proven top players. And I think that the way Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has gone out in the transfer market, we know that he's bought Harry Maguire, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Dan James, and recently, Bruno Fernandes and Odion Ighalo have been fantastic acquisitions. But he's also well aware of what talent he's got coming through. I also think that at this moment in time, the transfer market is going to be a little bit stagnant. After this coronavirus pandemic, we're going to see wages lowering. We're going to see transfer fees lowering. Yes, clubs may still be paying 40 or 50 million pounds for a player, and I'm sure that the top teams in the respective countries can afford to do that, certainly in the likes of England and Spain and Italy. But outside of that, we know that this pandemic has had massive, massive implications in the world of football as well. And I don't think you are going to see huge transfer fees for a good number of years. I really, really don't. But irrespective, it's a word you just used, irrespective of that, I think that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he might be looking at maybe one or two more players. But off the back of that, I think that he's got an abundance of talent that is ready to start knocking on his door, to start challenging for places. We've already mentioned names. We've already seen Mason Greenwood come in and score 12 goals. Brandon Williams, who's been superb, coming straight basically from youth football into the first team. And I think that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer knows that these players maybe in 6 months' time will be ready to play in the first team. And I think that is going to save him an awful lot in the transfer market.
Ben, if I can just go back a little bit, back to your time. Obviously, after the injury, most of the 95-96 season, I believe, you had to spend so much time out rehabilitating. In the lead up to before you left, and I know you went out on loan to Stockport, I know you enjoyed your time at Huddersfield. You played 9 games for Manchester United, if we're not counting your debut. So those 8 games after that, was there ever a time you felt after the injury that you can maybe, I know you felt that you weren't at that level anymore, but were you still confident, or was the manager confident that you could still be a squad player? Because at United, you do need, all our strength has always been having strong squads. It's not just about the 11 guys who start, but it's also the guys who come on, week in, week out, sometimes play, not as often as the others, but the unsung heroes, your Ji-Sung Parks, your John O'Shea's, your Darren Fletchers. Was it a possibility, you think, for you to consider a role like that, being in the team maybe as a backup, or someone who would come in from time to time, starting cup games and things like that?
No, it wasn't for me. I must admit. As brilliant as it sounds to be a Manchester United squad player, I wasn't really content with being just a squad player. I think that, in your chosen profession, you don't want to be in the background. You want to try and make the best of your ability and what you've got. And if I was just going to be a squad player, I don't think I would ever be able to demonstrate that. And I also think that in order to improve myself, I needed to leave Manchester United to prove to myself that I actually was still, quite a good player. And I felt as though in all the clubs that I joined subsequently, there were times when it didn't go so well, but there were also times when I do remember that, I made the right decision. As glamorous as it is to play for Manchester United, it's not quite so glamorous when you know that you're just going to go in training every week and you're only playing for the reserves. And that's no disrespect, because reserve team football is a huge stepping stone. But when the stepping stone is one that you're using to go backwards and not forwards, then it's not quite so, it doesn't give you quite the thrill. But knowing that on a Saturday afternoon, you're going to train all week and you're going to play in front of, even if it's only 15,000 people, it's 15,000 people that are desperate for you to do well, and that it means a lot to them that their club get the 3 points or progress to the next round of the cup. And I wanted to be part of that. And I don't think at any time after 1998, or even after 96 really, but certainly between 1996 and 98, I did know then that what I needed to do was to move on. And like I've already said to you, Sir Alex agreed with me when we finished the 97-98 season.
And you'd also had a taste of playing for England. So, you'd shown that you could play at the very highest level. Was that, obviously you needed first team football to back up that possibility continuing?
Yes, absolutely. If I think to where I was in 1994, having just done the injury, and then 2 years later, in the May of 1996, I was picked to play for England. That showed me how far I'd come, how far I'd worked, and it also proved to me that there was still a chance for me to be able to play football at quite a high level. And I'm very proud of that fact. I never obviously got a chance to play for the full team, but to be able to be recognised for the England under-21s was something, really, really special for me.
And 96 was a time with football coming home. I remember it so clearly, being in London at that time, and the Euros coming back it was like it was in 2018. It was a feeling that obviously at that time, any kind of involvement or thing with England, it was just anything anyone ever thought about, wasn't it? 96 was such a special year for England football as a whole.
Yeah, it was. I think any time that you think about football, in that year, you think of Euro 96, you think of Gaza and his brilliant goal against Scotland, and it was a wonderful time to be involved, and I was no different. I know that my involvement was never going to be with the Euro 96 squad, but I had the next best thing, and that was playing for the England 21s in the Toulon tournament, which I thoroughly enjoyed. David Beckham played alongside me in that tournament as well. So Yeah, you know, England, as they very often have, they've come very, very close, but they've not quite managed to emulate what they did in 1966. And you know, we're looking at the Euros for next year to see whether we can lift a trophy. All right, it won't be the World Cup, but it'll be the next best thing. And 1996 was a great time for me to be involved in the national team, because there was such a you know, a huge thing encircling it, thinking that we had a real chance, and lo and behold, the Germans beat us again.
Of course, it's always the Germans, isn't it?
Okay, so Ben, I'm going to move to a couple of fan questions before we move towards the end.
Okay.
Noman Zahir is asking, were the senior players easily approachable, or did you have to have a certain number of first-team games under your belt to get along with them?
No, not at all. That was one of the things at Manchester United that just made your transition so easy, was that the players that were in that dressing room at the time made it so easy for you. They wanted to help you. They wanted to integrate you into the team. They knew that if Sir Alex Ferguson picked you to train or play with them, that you must be good enough. And they treated you like one of their own. Hey, don't get me wrong, they didn't go easy on you. You know, if you were involved in that dressing room and you were training with them and you were playing with them, you had to be very, very quickly up to that standard, and they expected you to be there. But without any question, if you wanted to go and speak to Steve Bruce or Brian Robson or Dennis Irwin or Mark Hughes or Brian McClare, anybody like that, their ears would be open, and you were absolutely more than welcome to go and speak to them. There wasn't I know that in the 70s there was something like that, where you had to knock on the door and there was a hierarchy. But when we were coming through, the players that we were trying to, believe it or not, we were actually trying to take their place, but they were still more than helpful, and they would give you everything that they had with their knowledge.
And obviously you've spoken about the youth as well, so there are a few questions about that. Do you think the youth and obviously the mixture of senior players currently in the team are capable enough of winning their Premier League anytime soon, 1 to 2 years, or how long do you think that will be?
I think that you're probably looking at another 2 years. I do, honestly. I think United have obviously gone through a huge barren spell. They haven't won the Premier League since Sir Alex left in 2013. Sadly, they're not going to win it this year either. We all know who is, but there's not a lot we can do about that. But I think that come the 2021 season, with the players that have already demonstrated how good they are, just before the lockdown started in March and the season had to be, you know, stopped, with whoever Ole Gunnar Solskjaer brings in, and he will bring a couple of players in, I'm sure, when we all understand when the transfer window is going to be opened, etc. Manchester United will not be far away. I certainly know that they will close the gap on Manchester City and Liverpool. There will not be a huge bridge to get over. And I think that in the 21-22 season, you will be looking at Manchester. If not next year, they will. I said they will close the gap. Who knows in football? If you'd have said to me in the start of the 15-16 season, Leicester City were going to win the league, nobody would have believed you. So, you know, things do happen in football. I don't want to say strange things, because Manchester United winning the league is not strange, but they have been quite a way away from doing that in the last 6-7 years. But they are looking like they're starting now to build a team that will maintain a challenge to the teams at the top, those being Liverpool and Manchester City. And maybe next year might be too soon. It'll be close. But certainly in the 21-22 season, I think you will see a Manchester United team that a lot of teams will fear.
Okay, and for all our viewers listening, obviously Ben has written a book as well, and I'll be sharing the link with you. Ben, is it on Amazon or any other way we can?
Yeah, it will be. I mean, it's been out now since October of 2018, but I'm pretty sure that you can still get hold of a copy at Amazon, at Waterstones, or, you know, other bookshops or retail outlets, I'm sure you can get hold of it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll be sharing the links as well. So hopefully you guys can get the book and read it as well. And Ben, the last question is from my side. Who are you closest with from the class of '92? Because we might have a favor to ask.
Do you know what? I still speak on a regular occasion to certainly Keith Gillespie is one of my close friends. I still see Gary Neville on match days when he's doing his work with Sky, and I'm with MUTV. We had Paul Scholes on our MUTV group chat on Friday morning, and I see him when he's working for BT on pitch side as well. Nicky Butt, obviously, he's working with the club, so I see him regularly. So, yeah, the only one that is very, very elusive is David Beckham, but I'm sure you can understand why.
Okay, so we're not going to ask you to ask him to come on our show. Who can you
listen, I can ask him, but I can tell you now what the answer will be.
No, but we know that already. So who are you going to ask for us?
Listen, if you pluck a name, then I can ask Keith Gillespie as soon as I get off. He's a fantastic guy,
brilliant.
fantastic
guest. That'd be brilliant. Keith's a legend. Yeah,
he's a top guy, and I'm more than happy to ask him and message you guys back with a response.
That'd be brilliant.
Yeah, of course. We'll wait for your response, because I tried searching for his social media. I don't think he's on social media.
I think he's on Facebook. He's not on Twitter, but he is on Facebook. Yeah.
So we're going to need your help for that then.
No problem. I will ask you and I'll message you back.
Also, Ben, I would like to, on behalf of all of us here in Pakistan, let you know that whenever things get better, I hope you can come out here and visit us.
I'd love to.
You know, we told Maisie the other day when we spoke to him and to Lou Macari, there's so much love for this club, and people here, they would love to have you out here, maybe to one of our screenings too. I know United do a lot of events over in India, which is just right across, you know. We've obviously got better food. I don't need to tell you that. So it's for just that alone, and it would be an absolute privilege and an honor to have you here in Pakistan. When things are better, we work something out.
I would absolutely love to come. I would come across with David May. We'd have a great time.
It would be brilliant. It would be a party.
He's already agreed to come, so hopefully you can come along as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Okay, then, Ben, thanks for your time, and I'm sure everyone is leaving a lot of positive comments for you as well, and everyone is enjoying this show with your presence in it. So hopefully we can have you sometime soon again as well.
No problem at all, guys. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.